Let's get down to business.
Thanks for coming out tonight.
I wrote me a manual, a step-by-step booklet for you to get.
Oh, I make money move.
You can't see me, my time is now.
What up, guys? Welcome back to the Fitness Times Business Podcast. My name is Joseph Mencel. I am your host. And guys, this current pandemic, this current state of affairs, the current circumstances, let's call it a lockdown, let's call it isolation, let's call it stay at home, whatever you want to call it, and whatever it looks like in your current country or city or state of residence, this is going to be around for a while, guys. At least 6 months, the way that our governments are kind of planning and modeling. Probably more likely for the better part of 12 to 18 months. The truth is nobody really knows. And the other truth is there's a lot of negative shit that's being caused by the current pandemic. Negative health effects, negative economic effects. Finally, there's talk in traditional media about negative mental health effects. It's kind of difficult to escape all of the negativity. It's all you hear about from traditional media. It's all you hear about on websites. It's mostly what you hear about on social media. So I'm not going to talk to you guys about that. I'm not interested in adding to any of that negativity. You can definitely find it. It's quite easy to find. I want to talk to you guys about the positivity that's coming out of the current pandemic, because you don't need to dig very deep to find all of the positivity that the current state of affairs, the current circumstances is bringing to light. The first is the strength of the human spirit. Amazing, hugely positive. Community, the sense of community, people getting together, people helping each other out. The real leadership that's being shown, for the most part, not by our politicians, unfortunately, but the real leadership that's being shown in the business realm, in the healthcare realm in particular. Man, there are some awesome examples of real leadership being shown. And the opportunities that are being created by the current circumstances, by people having more time on their hands than they know what to do with, by the current circumstances exposing and removing certain fears that people may have had and used as excuses to not pursue this or pursue that. Or there's a lot of opportunities, guys, that are the longer we go through and the longer these current state of affairs and the current circumstances persist for, the more obvious these opportunities are becoming. And this episode of Fitness Times Business is called the Personal Development Pandemic, because one of the biggest opportunities that is becoming hugely visible is personal development. A lot of us have more time to start thinking about our personal development. And a lot of us are being exposed. And I mean that in the best possible sense. A lot of our character traits under stress, under uncertainty, under the current circumstances are being exposed for what they are. And perhaps some of us are getting surprised by our character traits, by the character traits that are coming through given the current circumstances. A lot of the common fears that a lot of us use as excuses when it comes to not developing certain character traits are also being exposed. The fear of failure, the fear of other people's opinions, self-doubt are all being exposed by the current state of affairs, by the current circumstances, by the current pandemic. And a lot of the safety nets that a bunch of us have relied upon have also been exposed, have also been removed. It's kind of like there's a saying in business that was really spawned in the GFC, the global financial crisis in 2008. And I'm such a big fan of this saying. I love it. I use it very, very frequently. And it specifically applies, once again, in the business sense to the current pandemic. The saying is, when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. And effectively what that meant when it was first used in the global financial crisis was, in times of economic prosperity, businesses can be swimming naked. And the economic prosperity represents the ocean. When the economic prosperity is taken away, you can't hide in the water of the ocean anymore. And you're able to see who's been swimming naked. You're able to see which businesses have actually set themselves up in a position where they actually add enough value to get through a recession, a depression, or whatever an economic downturn looks like. The reason why I love this saying so much is because it doesn't just apply to business. And given the current pandemic, it applies to one's character. Because when the tide goes out and you're put in a circumstance that's very stressful, that's very uncertain, your true character traits are the only ones that are left. When the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. When the tide goes out, you find out what sort of a person you really are. And when it comes to the opportunities that the current pandemic are providing in the realm of personal development, I'm so excited by this, guys. I am so pumped up by the fact that a lot of these things are being exposed, and a lot of these, not only are a lot of our character traits being exposed, but we have time to work on them right now. A lot of us have more time than we ever thought we would ever have to work on personal development. So what I want to talk to you guys about in this episode of Fitness Times Business specifically are the 6 most important and most common character traits that I have personally identified as those character traits that are possessed by the most successful people that I have had the pleasure of spending time with. The most high of all high achievers, the highest of high performers that in all of my life experience, I have shared a meal with, I have hit a workout with, I have recorded a podcast with. These are the 6 character traits that I have noticed all of them possess. The character traits are courage and vulnerability, and in particular, the courage to lean into vulnerability. Discipline, and in particular, exerting discipline under stressful situations. Accountability, and in particular, personal accountability, as opposed to being held accountable by a third party. Gratitude and humility. Empathy and kindness. Optimism and confidence. And I want to talk about each of these 6 character traits given the current circumstances and what they kind of look like given the current circumstances, and then how you can start applying different strategies to make sure that you are using this opportunity presented by the current pandemic to work on your own personal development and start developing these 6 character traits that I have personally seen as the most common amongst the most successful people that I have ever interacted with. But before we get into them, there's a few things that we need to kind of flesh out in order to give a little bit of context. The first thing, I mentioned that this current pandemic is exposing a lot of things. I think the first thing that it's exposing, because of the amount of stress and uncertainty associated with how long is this lockdown going to last? How long is this isolation going to last? How long is this current pandemic going to last? It's an extremely unprecedented, stressful situation. So the first thing to identify is, what is your initial instinct to this extremely unprecedented, stressful situation? And for the most part, there's going to be 3 things that you're going to do. You're either going to fight, you're going to flight, or you're going to freeze. And it's important to understand what your natural instinct is, because when we start talking about these 6 character traits, it's going to be pretty obvious which ones you tend to lean into and which ones you tend to lean away from, and therefore need to spend more time when it comes to your personal development. So the fight response generally looks like a very quick action without much consideration. So you're handed this stressful situation, you just want to do shit. You want to fight. You don't really give it much thought, you just want to do shit. The flight situation is pretty much burying your head in the sand and doing nothing. Really not taking action at all. The freeze is once again burying your head in the sand, but a slightly different spin on that, where it's more a denial of the current circumstances and the current situation, and you pretty much just go along your daily routine and don't really change much at all. So you've got fight, change everything very quickly. You've got flight, don't do anything. And you've got freeze, business as usual. The first thing is to consider is which of those is your natural instinct. Are you a fight? Are you a flight? Or are you a freeze? And there's no right or wrong here, guys. Not one is better than the other. If your initial instinct is to freeze, I'm not saying you should try and change that to flight or fight. There is no better scenario. This is just the way that you are internally wired. This is something that you need to identify, and it is what it is. The next thing to consider are the exposure of, or more the removal is probably a better word, of these common fears that I talk about. The fear of failure, the fear of other people's opinions, and the fear of self-doubt. And the reason why it's important to understand that the current pandemic is exposing and therefore removing these fears is because for most of us, when it comes to personal development, these are the fears that we use as excuses for not pursuing the 6 character traits that I'm about to talk to you guys about. Not having courage because you're afraid of failing. Not leaning into vulnerability because you're afraid of other people's opinions. Not taking the leap because you suffer from self-doubt. Well, guys, guess what? The current pandemic has completely removed the fear of failure. The what if it doesn't work situation. Guys, nothing's fucking working at the moment. Everything's failing at the moment. It's not an excuse. It's not a fear. It doesn't exist anymore. The fear of other people's opinions. What are other people going to think of me taking this action or leaning into this vulnerability? Guys, we're all in the same boat at the moment. Everybody is stressed the fuck out. Everybody is vulnerable. Everybody has had their life flipped on its fucking head. The fear of other people's opinions does not exist anymore. Nobody has the right to have an opinion over anything because we're all in the same situation. We're all in this together. So that fear, that excuse, you can't use that one anymore. It doesn't exist. And then self-doubt. I can't do it. I don't believe in myself. More importantly, I don't have time. That's a huge excuse. Guys, we've got more time than we've ever had before. You think you can't do something? Everyone else is in the same boat right now. Our ability to get things done has been completely paralyzed. You can't use that excuse anymore. That fear is invalid. It doesn't exist. The 3 main fears that we use as excuses for pursuing these character traits that make up the personal development character traits of the most successful people on the planet. You can't use them anymore. They've been exposed. And what about the removal of the safety nets that I talk about? The exposure of these safety nets. There is no plan B anymore, guys. It doesn't exist. That security, that safety net that you thought that was there, perhaps they were golden handcuffs for you, those of you who are in the corporate world. Perhaps they were some sort of safety net that you thought, well, you know, if it doesn't work, I've always got that to fall back on. For most of us, the safety nets are gone. They don't exist anymore. There is no plan B. What we thought was security, whether it be job security, whether it be financial security, whatever the fuck it is, it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. There is no plan B. And why am I smiling as I'm talking to you guys about this? This is a dire situation. The security's gone. The safety nets are gone. Why am I so excited about this? Why am I so pumped up about this? Because guys, these are the excuses that so many of us use when it comes to not being able to make courageous decisions, when it comes to not exerting discipline, when it comes to not keeping promises that we keep to ourselves. We use these as excuses. We lock them down as fears, and they paralyze us from pursuing our own personal development, and they're all fucking gone. This virus has completely wiped them out, and it is absolutely amazing because we have never had such an incredible opportunity to work on our own personal development as we do right now with all of these excuses off the fucking table. So let me go through these character traits one by one. The 6 most common character traits that I have identified as being common amongst the most successful people that I've ever come across. The first one is courage and vulnerability. First things first, as a little bit of, I guess, a check, if your initial response to the current circumstance is to fight, you're probably already going to be showing a bit of courage and vulnerability. If your initial circumstance is flight or freeze, you're probably not. So this is one you're probably going to have to work on. Guys, let me tell you right now, if you cannot build up the courage to lean into your vulnerability, to make the difficult decisions, and to have the hard conversations right now, when every person on the fucking planet is in the same situation, you will never build up the courage to be able to do it. The time is now. This is an opportunity that is never going to come again. I don't know what it looks like for you. I don't know what your hard conversations are. I don't know what your difficult decisions are in the fitness realm, in the business realm, in the personal life realm. They're going to look different for everybody, but you guys know what they are. And if you're avoiding them, if you're passing the buck, if you're passing off responsibility, you need to take control. You need to lean into the vulnerability. You need to have the hard conversations. You need to make the difficult decisions, because if you can't do it now, you're never going to be able to fucking do it. And that's just the truth. You got to get uncomfortable, guys. You got to get vulnerable. You know what? You already are. And that's the beautiful thing about this current pandemic. You're already vulnerable. You're already uncomfortable. So you actually don't even need to go there. All you need to do right now is you need to execute. That's it. All you need to do to show some courage right now is to execute, to actually do what needs to be done, to make the difficult decisions, to have the hard conversations, and just execute. It's never going to get easier than this to show some courage and lean into vulnerability. Never going to get easier. If you can't do it now, you're never going to be able to do it. So do it. I have this saying that true courage is the ability to act without any guarantee of success. The current circumstances are a 100% representation of this, guys. You have zero guarantee of any sort of outcome given the current circumstances. True courage is being able to make the decision, have the hard conversation, and not know what the outcome is. That is what is leaning into vulnerability. That is what is getting uncomfortable. The good news is, once you do it for the first time, given these circumstances, you'll be able to do it every time after. And that's why this is such a huge opportunity. Execute. Do it. Discipline under stress. is the next character trait that the most successful people I have experienced all possess. And just as a check, once again, if your initial response to the current circumstance is to fight or flight, you're probably going to need to work on this one a little bit. Your discipline's probably not where it needs to be. If your initial response is to freeze, you're probably pretty good with discipline. But listen up anyway. Discipline under stress is sticking to habits and routines that move you closer to your goals, regardless of the current circumstance. And you can see why this one is, there's not going to be a better time to work on your discipline than right now, because the current circumstance, the whole world is flipped on its fucking head. This is the most stressful, the most erratic, the most chaotic circumstance most of us are going to ever experience in our lives. So once again, similar to courage and leaning into vulnerability, if you can exert discipline right now, given the current pandemic, it is going to be an absolute walk in the park for you to exert discipline when things go back to normal. Once in a lifetime opportunity. On the other hand, if you can't exert discipline right now, you probably got no fucking chance of being able to do it, given any circumstances. I'm talking about being patient while remaining consistent to your habits and routines. We don't know how long this is going to last, guys. It could be 6 months. It could be 12 months. It could be 2 years. For the economy to come back worldwide, it could be 5 to 10 years. We don't know. This is about sticking to your habits and routines that support your goals, whatever those goals are. I don't know what they are. You know what they are. Whatever they are, sticking to the habits and routines day in, day out, being consistent while exerting patience. That is discipline. And if you can do it under stress, doing it when you're not stressed is going to be one of the easiest things for you to do. I'm talking about doing the simple but not easy things. I'm talking about the basic shit that needs to get done, that the current pandemic, by nature of flipping everything on its head, the simple things are probably the least easiest they've ever been. But you still got to do them because they make up the habits and routines that move you closer towards your goals. I'm talking about marathon mindset. I'm talking about sticking to your habits and routines, being consistent with your habits and routines for as long as it takes, no matter how long it takes, because you know they are what are going to get you to your final destination, whatever that destination may be. So the question you need to ask yourself is, are you able to stay disciplined right now? The most stressful circumstance most of us have ever experienced and will ever experience. This is the time to test this character trait. This is the time to work on this character trait, because if you can exert discipline under this amount of stress, man, you got this when we get to the other side. Personal accountability, the third character trait. And what I'm talking about here, guys, is accountability to oneself as opposed to being accountable to a third party. As an example, a lot of us at this point in time are working from home. We don't have our boss or our superior there watching us each and every day, making sure that we're doing what we need to do. In a fitness realm, for those of us who have a coach or a trainer, we don't have our coach or our trainer there watching us every workout. We may not even be checking in as frequently. We may not be doing in the workspace the reporting that we do as frequently to make sure that we're being held accountable by a third party. What I'm talking about here is, what are you doing when no one else is watching? That's personal accountability. What are the promises that you're making to yourself that you're keeping? That's personal accountability. And when it comes to your instinctual reaction to the current circumstances, fight, flight, or freeze, if you're the sort of person who fights, you've probably got pretty reasonable personal accountability. If you're the sort of person whose instinct is flight or freeze, you're probably going to have to spend a bit of time working on this character trait. The question you need to ask yourself is, are you able to hold yourself accountable when there's nobody else there watching? Are you able to make those promises to yourself and keep them? If you're not, now is the best time to start working on it. Are you doing the things that suck? The things that you don't want to do? But usually, if you've got the third party there in the workspace, your boss or your superior, they're going to force you to do them. In the fitness space, your trainer or your coach, they're going to force you to do them. Are you doing them anyway? Now that you don't have that third party accountability, now that it's just you, yourself, and your thoughts, are you able to do the things that suck? If you're not, this is the perfect time to start working on them, guys. Set interim goals. Make promises to yourself. Write the promises down. Figure out the things that you're avoiding that suck, that you know that you need to do. In the business space, in the fitness space, in your personal life space, write them down and make sure they're the first things that you do each and every day. Prioritize them. Make those promises. Execute. Work on your personal accountability. Gratitude and humility. To be honest with you guys, this one's a little separate from your instinctual reaction to the current circumstances. Whether you fight, flight, or freeze, there's no real correspondence between that and exerting gratitude and humility. When it comes to gratitude, you really need to ask yourself, are you focused on what you can do and what you do have? Or are you more driven by envy, which is what you can't do and what you don't have? Let me tell you guys, gratitude and humility are super prevalent in the most successful people that I have had the pleasure of crossing paths with. They're all extremely grateful and they're all humble as fuck. They're all able to focus on what they have, what they can do. They're not driven by what they don't have and what they can't do. And given the current circumstances, considering so much of what most of us would have taken for granted has been taken away from us, it's very easy to flip into that mindset of envy and start feeling sorry for yourself. I don't have this. I can't do this. Life is shit. If that's your mindset, you got to start flipping that shit. You got to start gratitude journaling every morning. You got to start thinking about the things you're grateful for, the things that you can do, the things that you do have control over. That's gratitude. What about humility? And on the flip side, entitlement. Are you waiting for things to be done for you? Are you waiting for handouts from the government, for example? Are you waiting for friends and family or employers or business partners or whoever the fuck it is to come to the rescue because you're entitled? If you are, you guys got to flip that shit, man. You got to start working on humility. You got to start thinking about what are the things you can do for others. Given your current circumstances, how can you help others out? How can you help the community out? If you're focused on yourself and your personal hardships, and that is what dominates your thoughts, that's entitlement. Let me tell you guys, the most successful people that I've crossed paths with, none of them are entitled. They're all humble. Humble as fuck. And one of the things that I think a lot of us are coming to realize, the longer that this pandemic goes on, is when so much has been taken away from us, so many things that we quote unquote valued when we had them, but perhaps took for granted. The only thing we have left is gratitude and humility. The only thing we have left is our ability to focus on what we have and what we can do and how we can assist others in the community. That's it. That's gratitude. That's humility. If you're struggling with that, now is the perfect time, because you've been exposed, to start gratitude journaling, to start focusing on others, to start assisting others, to paying things forward, to helping the community. That's gratitude and humility. Empathy and kindness. Once again, it doesn't really matter what your instinctual reaction is to the current circumstances, fight, flight, or freeze. Empathy and kindness kind of sits outside of that. And this does tie into gratitude and humility a fair bit. And let me tell you guys, once again, this is hugely prevalent across the most successful people, across those highest of high achievers, across the high performers, is having empathy and the ability to be kind. So when it comes to empathy, are you able to consider others and their struggles at this point in time, considering we're all in this together? Or are you focused on yourself? Are you focused on your struggles? And you really don't give a fuck about how someone else is feeling, what emotion someone else is experiencing, what struggle someone else is experiencing. Are you being kind to others, or are you being hostile and selfish? Are you being selfless, or are you being greedy? Let me tell you guys, if you're sitting on the fence regarding empathy and kindness, this is the perfect time to start giving some thought to what other people are going through, what struggles other people are experiencing, what emotions other people are going through, and starting to pay some kindness forward. And it's really simple. Random acts of kindness right now are going to be the most appreciated that they have ever been for most of us in our lifetimes. So now is the perfect time to start making a promise to yourself that you're going to do something kind for someone else each and every day. Could be a phone call, could be an email, could be a gift of some sort. It doesn't matter. Something kind. Random. Not to pay somebody back for something, to pay something forward. Now is the time for kindness. Now is the time for empathy. Now is the time to reach out to people in your community and ask if they're okay, ask how they're doing, and take a real interest in their struggles, in their emotions, in what they're going through. Now is the time to exert the muscles that are going to allow you to be empathetic and be kind when the current pandemic is over. And the sixth and final, optimism and confidence. Let me tell you guys, if your initial instinctual reaction to the current circumstances is fight, you're probably pretty optimistic and pretty confident. Not guaranteed, but you probably are. If your initial response is flight or freeze, you're going to have to spend a bit of time working on this one, guys. Optimism and confidence. Are you able to see the opportunities in the midst of chaos? Because they are there. They are always there. You just have to be willing to look for them. Are you able to see the silver lining through the dark clouds that's currently covering the entire world at the moment? Because they are there. They're always there. You just have to be willing to look for them. Are you able to visualize what it feels like once this pandemic is over, and how amazing life is going to be when we start to get things back that we took for granted, when we start to execute on those new opportunities that the current pandemic is granting us? Can you visualize not just what that looks like, but what that feels like? I can feel it right now as I'm talking to you guys right now, and it's giving me fucking goosebumps. Can you do that? If not, you need to start working on it. Do you have the confidence that after this is all over, you're going to come out on top? Or are you so consumed, so worried by the current pandemic, by the current circumstances, that you're paralyzed and you can't even think about next week, let alone next month, let alone next year, let alone what it looks like when the current pandemic is over? Let me tell you guys, one of the simplest things you can do is literally give that some conscious thought. Start looking for the opportunities. Start visualizing what it's going to feel like in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Start feeling how good it's going to feel when you can get the little things back that you took for granted. Maybe it's going to the gym again. Maybe it's going to a social event again. Whatever that looks like for you, put yourself in that space. Start to experience it. Start to feel it in your bones. And that is where you're going to start getting some optimism and some confidence from. Guys, all of these things take practice. All of these character traits, it's not like a switch. You can't flick it on. You can't flick it off. They take practice. But this current pandemic, these current circumstances are the best catalyst that most of us will ever have in our lifetime to start putting these things into practice, to start working on courage by making the difficult decisions and having the hard conversations, to start exerting discipline, to start keeping the promises that we make to ourselves, to start being kind to others, being empathetic to the way others feel, to start working on our humility, to start gratitude journaling if we're not doing it already, to start feeling and looking for the opportunities and visualizing what they feel like when we execute on them. This is the best catalyst that we've ever had. It's not going to be easy, and it's not like flicking on and off a switch. You can't expect to just go, yep, listen to Fitness Times Business on the personal development pandemic, and now I'm exerting and executing all of those 6 character traits that were discussed. It doesn't work like that. One at a time, day by day, focus on the ones that you've identified while listening to this episode that you need to focus on. Now is the best time to do it. Guys, this pandemic that we're currently experiencing and all of the flow-on effects, this is the great equalizer. This is the great exposer. This is the great clearing of the decks when it comes to personal development, because the gloves are off. All of the excuses have been wiped off the table. All of the fears have been eradicated. You can't use them as excuses for not working on your personal development anymore. They're gone. This is the great equalizer. So the only question left is, how are you going to come out of this? Are you going to take this as an opportunity to work on these 6 character traits so that when things go back to normal, it's going to be super easy for you to exert courage and lean into your vulnerability, for you to hold yourself personally accountable, for you to exert discipline, for you to exert gratitude and humility, for you to exert empathy and kindness, and for you to be super optimistic? Or are you going to let this opportunity pass you by? Because at the end of the day, guys, it's a choice. You can choose to do one or the other. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I encourage you guys to choose to use this opportunity to work on your personal development, because this is the personal development pandemic. Guys, I ask one thing in return. If you've made it to this far in this podcast and you have found value in this content, the one thing that I ask in return is that you pass this forward. This is my way of exerting kindness, to be honest with you guys. I'm putting this content out into the universe absolutely free. The only thing I ask is that you pass it forward. Tell somebody about it. Tell someone you love about it. Tell a friend. Tell a family member. Because we're in isolation at the moment, post a screenshot. Take a screenshot right now of whatever platform you're listening to this on and post it in your Instagram story. Tag me at Joseph Mencel. I love seeing those, and I reshare as many of them as I possibly can. That's probably the most efficient way that you can pay this content forward, because I want to get this to as many people as possible and make sure that as many of you as possible are using this personal development pandemic to work on your personal development. Guys, you could have been anywhere in the world right now, but you're here with me. I appreciate that. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Fitness Times Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode, make sure you give us a 5-star rating. Until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side.